Do you want to know all about Williamsburg? Well, today we're talking about the pros and cons of living in Williamsburg, and we're starting right now. Hey, my name is Sam Sansalone, and I'm a real estate agent in Hampton Roads, Virginia. And if it's your first time here, welcome. Hit the subscribe button and the bell notification. Hit that like button too. That will tell the YouTube algorithms that I'm doing a great job. And I help people from all over the world, literally, move into this area, and it's so awesome. I love doing it. So if you have any questions at all, plan to move into the area at any point in time, let me know, reach out to me. I got my contact information in the description. But today we're talking about Williamsburg, the pros and cons of living in Williamsburg. There's so much here in Williamsburg, but there's great reasons to live here, but there's also some negatives too. So where is Williamsburg after we're talking about all that? Well, on the map you'll see there's a peninsula just north of the south side of Hampton Roads. That peninsula has Hampton, Newport News, Yorktown, Jamestown, and several other counties in and around Williamsburg, which is on the kind of the north central section of this area. It's about an hour north of Virginia Beach and about an hour and a half south of Richmond. And you're about 20 to 25 minutes away from lots of the central and most active places in Newport News. So the pros. First of all, it's the history. The history here is rich. So to know about Williamsburg's history is to go back before Williamsburg originated. There are two areas we're going to talk about first, Jamestown and Middle Plantation. In 1607, Jamestown became the capital of the Virginia colony. It was discovered and settled back in 1607. But going just north of Jamestown, in 1632, this section of this peninsula was called Middle Plantation. And all of this was located in what was called the James City County, which is now still there and currently the oldest county in the United States. But once Middle Plantation was established in 1632, back then, homes were still constructed mainly out of wood. But in the 1650s, a guy named John Page migrated here. He's a merchant, came from Middlesex, England, and built his home there. And one of the things interesting about John Page is he built a brick home. That's significant because brick represents stability and wealth. And so once that home was built, there were several other people that also built brick homes in this area too, and it kind of changed the complexion of this section of Middle Plantation. So then people started migrating to this area, and the area started growing, 1660s, 1670s. And then in 1693, a guy named James Blair had gone to England, came back, and had a charter for what is now the second oldest college in America, called William and Mary, named after the current King of England back in that time. So what does this have to do with Williamsburg? Well, Jamestown, the capital of Virginia at the time, 4 times their capital burned down since that 1607 time when it was founded. So the 4th time it did, in 1698, the state legislature moved temporarily up to William and Mary and met in the Wren Building, which is still now the oldest academic building in America, still in continuous use. The legislature met there in 1698. But during that time, 5 students of William and Mary came together and provided a proposal to the legislature to permanently move the capital from Jamestown up to Middle Plantation. One of the reasons that they gave was because Jamestown was so close to water, there was a lot of mosquitoes. Those mosquitoes back then carried malaria. So there was actually a pretty significant malaria problem in Jamestown. And so this was one solution to try and alleviate that problem. Well, the students got what they asked for, and it was agreed upon that Middle Plantation became the new capital of Virginia. And at that point, they changed the name from Middle Plantation to Williamsburg, named after King William III. So that's how Williamsburg was created in 1699. So all the history I mentioned earlier, that's just the tip of the iceberg. Anywhere you drive, you'll see signs describing old things that happened at whatever location. There's Jamestown, there's Yorktown, where battles were fought. On the north and south sides of Williamsburg, there are other significant locations. This area is feet deep in the oldest American history that there is. So if you do plan to move to this area, you're never gonna have a lack of learning about what happened back then. So pro number 2, the quality of life. So this area, a lot of people like to talk about because they like to retire here. People love raising families here in this area, mainly because of the schools. There's some really high-ranked schools in this area. A couple specifically that are some of the best in the state. I'll drop links below for the school districts and niche.com school rankings, because there are people that come to Chesapeake and Virginia Beach for schools. Well, there are some of the best schools in the area up here in Williamsburg also. And next to that is the low crime. So while there are places in every city that might have higher crime than others. Most of Williamsburg is really, really quiet. I'll drop links too about the crime statistics. Trulia maps are really good at giving you an idea of if there are any specific spots that have higher crime. You're going to be pretty pleased at how low the crime is, generally speaking, in Williamsburg. Now, number 3 is you're surrounded by nature. So wherever you go, they do a great job in Williamsburg of preserving what is here, preserving the old history. And part of that is the land itself. And so you'll see neighborhoods, you'll see, stores, you'll see like downtown colonial Williamsburg is great. But in the midst of all the things, all the buildings, all the stuff around, there's a lot of green space, lots of trees. And one of my favorite roads in all of the area, possibly my favorite road, is Colonial Parkway. It stretches from Yorktown on the north side of the peninsula, all the way through Williamsburg, all the way down to Jamestown. This road is awesome. It's got a unique drive to it. It's not like a normal paved road. It's basically concrete. And so when you're driving on it, it sounds different. You'll drive under huge brick arched overpasses, and then you keep going, you'll drive, and then you'll see trees, 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 and then break off to the left, and there's a small little beach maybe, or the shoreline of the James River or York River. Some people fish, some people have picnics. I've driven by and seen people fly kites. It's awesome places off the beaten path, but close enough to main stuff to where you're not driving too far. But it's got enough of a rustic kind of country feel to it that sends you back in time, back in the 1700s, to when you could almost picture yourself being here back when people were just docking off the coast, exploring this area for the first time. And as you drive through some of this green space, you'll see signs explaining different things that happened at any individual location where the sign is. Because there are different battles that happened. They talk about different people that explored this area or settled here. So they do a great job of combining the learning experience of the history of Williamsburg and marrying that with all the nature around. As you're driving and exploring, you can still get different tidbits about what happened back then. And even in William and Mary, which is right in central Williamsburg, you'll see lots of other places, parks. There are several great parks all around Williamsburg. Bicentennial Park, Freedom Park, there's Waller Mill Park. There's several parks all around Williamsburg and inside Williamsburg, different sizes. So if you walk through Williamsburg at any point in time, you're going to see a lot of people running, biking, sitting, enjoying themselves. It's a very pleasant atmosphere. In and amongst plenty of creeks and wooded areas near the water, so you're not separated from water very much, even as you drive through Williamsburg. Then the next pro is the architecture. So if you love the history, you probably recognize and love the architecture as well. So a lot of the new houses, the new buildings in this area, they try to either replicate what it was back then or try to do the best that they can to preserve the feel of the area as best as they can. As far as houses go, you will see new construction in this area that doesn't feel like old colonial style, but a lot of the neighborhoods are colonial, feel like they're colonial. They're built and designed with that in mind. So like I mentioned in the history section, those big brick houses, those are kind of staples of Williamsburg, and some neighborhoods in Williamsburg have lots of houses like that. And Williamsburg is equidistant basically between the York River and the James River. What's cool is there's an architectural review board that makes sure that any place that gets built, any signage in and around historical areas have a certain design to it, and make sure that the signs aren't crazy looking. You can even see even the street signs are unique, and the store signs are unique. They blend in with the colonial feel of the area. You'll even see special colors, special siding, windows. They're very specific because they want to make sure that the area stays the way it's been for so long. Now, speaking of the architecture, there's a lot of areas around Williamsburg that do feel like the colonial style. There are some that don't, but most houses in this area start in around the $250,000 to $300,000 price range on the very, very low end, like the 2 or 3 bedroom, attached houses or small single family houses. But the ones you'll see those colonial style houses, they start anywhere from the mid 4s, 500,000, 6, 7, 8 and higher. So you'll have a mixture of types of neighborhoods. But we're going to talk more about the real estate later on in the video. Now the next pro are the attractions. There's a ton. So if you come here for vacation, you have plenty to do. If you live here, you always have something to do. So Busch Gardens is in and around Williamsburg. Busch Gardens in Water Country, USA. It's my favorite theme park. I've gone there for decades, love it. People come from all over the world just to go to Busch Gardens, which is next to the Budweiser Brewery, which is why it's called Busch Gardens. You have the Jamestown settlement on the bottom side where Jamestown is. You can see the reenacted and recreated Jamestown settlement. You got the Williamsburg Winery for people that love wine, very good wine. You got historic Yorktown, and one thing about this area is people don't think about the beach very much. They assume that there's no beach over here. Well, there is actually a beach, the Jamestown Beach. You have to pay to park to be near the beach, but if if you're okay with that, you might have a nice alternative as opposed to driving an hour plus to get to the beach down the ocean front. And of course, colonial Williamsburg. This is essentially the recreated small town of Williamsburg, where you can park your car, you walk through the old colonial buildings, stores, little houses. There are reenactors that walk the streets and sing and talk, and they'll talk with you from old language. And there's a street primarily called the Duke of Gloucester Street, which stretches from one side of colonial Williamsburg to the other and ends at what's called the Governor's Palace, which is where several governors of Virginia live. And one of the reasons why the downtown Williamsburg area over here where the Governor's Palace is and where Duke of Gloucester Street is, it was set here back then because that was on a ridge. So the governor and other people around that area, because it was on top of a ridge, they could see over it in case anybody was coming to invade. That was one of the reasons why they settled in this area. And if you love shopping, there are tons of outlets up in this area, all in what's called a little town called Lightfoot. And there are several good restaurants in and around colonial Williamsburg also. One is the Fat Canary, love that one. A couple other high-ranked ones too, Chef's Kitchen and 2nd Street Bistro, but one that my friends and I and my wife and I like to go to if we go up to this area is the Dog Street Pub, which is in colonial Williamsburg, and another called the Cheese Shop. The Cheese Shop's awesome for a couple specific reasons. One is its location. It's right in the middle of colonial Williamsburg. It's nothing too fancy. They make good sandwiches, but on the first floor you go down, I think it's, I guess, really considered a basement. You go down to the basement and there's a little wine cellar down there, and they sell wine and beer, and you can buy a bottle of wine, get a couple glasses, and go outside in their grounds and sip on some wine and have a beer as you're eating the sandwich and people watching. Now the cons to living in Williamsburg. There are some cons. Number one, no nightlife. Yeah, that's right. I mean, all the things I've mentioned so far, you can tell that they're all happening during the day, and they're not necessarily like high action intensity stuff. I mean, there's lots of amazing things, it's just not that kind of style. So if you're looking for a little bit faster pace, more nightlife, things to do in the evening time after 9, 10 o'clock, this is not the place. While there are some restaurants that do stay open late, this is not a place you're gonna find that you're gonna enjoy for a long period of time when it gets dark. So if you do move here, for instance, and you do want some nightlife, you're gonna probably drive about 50 minutes to an hour to get to downtown Norfolk, and it might drive you crazy. Now, another con is that it's a long commute unless you work really close to Williamsburg. So for instance, if you're in the military, Fort Eustis is relatively close, as well as Langley and Hampton. But if you're talking about any of the military bases further south on the south side, it's gonna be super far commute. I mean, so you make sure you're planning for an hour or more to get to work and back if you're gonna live in that area and commute down to the south side where Norfolk, Virginia Beach, and Chesapeake are located. Same goes with Richmond. If you wanted to commute to Richmond, still about an hour and a half away, so it's gonna be a long one. So thankfully there are plenty of businesses in and around Williamsburg, so it's not like you're just out there in the middle of nowhere. But if you do work away from Williamsburg but you still love it, just know that there's gonna be a long commute coming. And the next con is the real estate is expensive. You're gonna get a lot for what you're paying for, but you're gonna still pay a lot. So for instance, $250,000, $300,000 is kind of the lowest price point for real estate in this area. You're gonna get mostly 2 or 3 bedroom options, some attached condos, townhouses, and some smaller single family houses in that price range. It's not until you get over 400 and up to 500 where you start seeing those colonial neighborhoods that we were talking about, some of those nice stately houses that take you back in time. Those are a higher price, 500, 600, 700 plus, but they're great neighborhoods. One example is Kings Mill and a few others, Ford's Colony, Governor's Land. There's some really big and nice neighborhoods that are incredibly well wooded, sometimes on golf courses, and well protected, to where people love to live in this area. People that have lower price points too can also live in places like Kings Mill because there are condos and smaller townhouses in here. But if you're willing to go a little bit higher, there's plenty of option around Williamsburg and in Williamsburg in that 400, 500, 600 price range. But it's a smaller town, so there's about 15,000 people in the actual proper Williamsburg. You're not going to find as much option as you would, for instance, in Newport News or Hampton or anywhere on the south side of Hampton Roads. So the real estate's awesome. I love it, but it's expensive. And the next con is it is so hot. Goodness gracious, it's hot. So summertime, usually the average is up in the mid to upper 80s, but it's real muggy. And usually it tops up in the 90s for about a month or so, I would say. But again, that heat index can pump up over 100. And so you talk to some people from places that are real hot and they'll kind of laugh at this, but but it does get hot for people in here, especially because this area is designed for you to live outside. There's so much green space, so much place to run and bike and just explore that being outside for a long period of time can get real hot. Like as I was doing this video, for instance, and recording outside, I was getting real hot and it was not comfortable. So during the summertime specifically, you'll have mugginess, mosquitoes, and it's hot, especially between like the mid to late June time period and the early to mid August time frame for sure. And I've done pros and cons videos about every city in Hampton Roads. So if you want to know about anything in this area, pluses, minuses, just the real information about what it's like to live in any city in Hampton Roads, including Williamsburg. I got videos here you can click through, you can learn more about this area. And if you need help moving into this area, need some guidance, and have any questions at all, anything, feel free to reach out. I've got my contact information in the description, and I will see you on the next video.